Okay, you're now live. Yeah, you see that too?
Hello, Rabbi Vogel.
Hi, Simon. Hi, Rabbi Jacobsen. Okay, relax. So should we start now?
Yeah.
Okay. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first of a series of interviews with prominent leaders from a range of backgrounds. Obviously, we have to take opportunities from these interesting times in which we find ourselves. So we have access now to people from around the world. And in finding a range of interesting, inspiring people who can share insight, inspiration, guidance, we thought that we would take advantage of a very prominent, let's say, thought leader, who has for many, many years shared ideas, novel ideas, based primarily on the teachings of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Obviously, all of us, most of us, have heard of the Rebbe in many ways over the years, and we have the privilege and the honor to have with us someone who has had a unique, if I may say, relationship with the Rebbe, in that he was his, let's say, personal scribe, transcribed the teachings for many, many years. I don't know the exact number, but 15, 20 years. So the Rebbe would speak many times on Shabbat and on the festivals where there were no recordings allowed, and therefore was reliant on people like Rabbi Jacobsen, who memorized those ideas, which normally went on for many hours, besides obviously the profundity of the ideas. And he would transcribe, him and a group of colleagues would transcribe those ideas and commit them to writing. And hence we have all those talks, ideas recorded over 40 years, thanks to the help of people like Rabbi Jacobsen. So again, it's a privilege and an honor to have with us today Rabbi Jacobsen, who I will interview, ask questions, and obviously to try to bring out the best in him to offer all of us, and we're all in this together, we're all in the same boat, we're looking for perspective, for inspiration, for guidance, for encouragement during these very difficult, challenging, extraordinary times. So just a few words about Rabbi Jacobsen, and then I will let go, just ask a few questions and let him do the talking, and that's certainly the idea. So he's the author of a few books, but most notably the book called Towards a Meaningful Life, which came out just after the passing of the Rebbe, and was the book that really captured comprehensively, concisely, and simply the teachings of the Rebbe, not just to a religious and not just to a Jewish audience, but to wider society. And it has sold many, many tens of thousands of copies. He also is the founder and the CEO of the Towards a Meaningful Life, which has tremendous resources, audio, video, and also text. And there are ideas that he's sharing on a regular basis through the various platforms, email distribution lists, social media, Facebook, Instagram, and a whole range of those platforms. And he reaches and touches many, many tens of thousands of people on a regular basis. So I just thought I would share a little bit of that. And we, again, would like to hear him share his thoughts as to, what we can, young people, older people, all types of people, gain guidance, wisdom, and inspiration during these very challenging times. So we will go straight into, that was just the introduction, the background, and now we will get straight into it. And we'll start with the following question. The question is that, many people have asked, and many people have heard the Rebbe and have been influenced by the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and people would like to know. So, what you think the Rebbe would have responded? What would he have said? What would he have challenged us to do during this current pandemic, during these very challenging times?
So first of all, thank you for having me. It's an honor. And I want to extend my prayers and blessings to all of you, whoever's listening and watching, both wherever you may be. We're all in this together, a global pandemic, and God should protect you all. Should all those that need healing have complete healing. Let me just begin with just sharing that, because we're all in a vulnerable state. Here I'm in New York, you're in London, and never has the world been so united, unfortunately, because we're all essentially susceptible. And at the same time, we have great opportunity here to connect in new ways. So I just wanted to open and thank you for making this happen. We wouldn't be talking like this, and we wouldn't if it weren't for the coronavirus. So let me just state at the outset, the Rebbe, a true quintessential leader. When I say leader, I don't mean most of the leaders we know today that are either administrators or fundraisers or facilitators. We're talking about a true visionary in the historical sense of Moses, Abraham, people who pioneer and are trailblazers. So the Rebbe, of course, faced in his life many tragedies. He was born in 1902, Tsarist Russia. A little after that, there would be the Russian Revolution, World War I. There was also the Spanish flu in 1918, which was a pandemic at its time. Went through World War I, World War II, personal losses. He's seen the decimation, of the Jewish people in the Holocaust. So we have a lot of documentation from the Rebbe, how he addressed as a leader would address. And I could sum it up, essentially two key points, which we can unpack if we wish. Number one is we are not insensitive to tragedy. It's not like a person of faith or a person of belief is in denial and just says, God will take care of everything. We're a prudent people. We have to be practical. And as the Torah guides us, we need to follow Torah, health authorities, a doctor. At the same time, there's another side of it, that in addition to physical health, there's also our spiritual health and psychological health and emotional health. And here, consistently, the Rebbe's approach to any type of setback or trauma or tragedy, or for that matter, whether it comes from war or from inhumanity, man to man, or from an epidemic like this, is that we always have the ability to control what is going on inside us and our attitudes. So even if events around us are not in our control, but you can control your attitude, and it always has to be one of being more fortitude, more confidence, more hope, and more strength, because the human spirit cannot be destroyed by anything. And Jewish history is the greatest testimony to that. We're coming to Passover. The whole story of Passover is that we were not vanquished, even though we were in slave labor, and it was a genocide and a Holocaust of its own. But the very powerful verse, which I think captures the Rebbe's attitude, is a verse in the book of Exodus that says, as they were oppressed, in direct proportion to that, they thrived and they flourished. I just read an article in the Wall Street Journal last week that we should learn from the Jewish nation, the biblical times, how cataclysmic events turned them into a great, powerful nation. And that's essentially the formula that the Rebbe always stuck to, that we cry for our losses, we're not insensitive, we need to be careful, and we need to be have empathy and so on. But Our spirits are never broken. We may suffer, but we're not sufferers. And we have to look at every situation, just like when you're at battle and a commander-in-chief says there may be a setback, maybe we can't go full force ahead, but we continue to navigate. We definitely do not retreat, and we rise to the occasion. So the Rebbe, I have no question in my mind. The first thing he would say is, there's darkness out there. Let us figure out ways to increase in light. Now, obviously, in a responsible way and following the guidelines. Use technology to spread goodness and kindness. Call people. Do everything we can possibly, more than ever before. They call it social distancing. Be more spiritually connected. That was always the Rebbe's counterforce. He never fought fire with fire. It was always the best defense is offense. You need to strengthen our value system. Look, we have opportunities today. I wish it wasn't through this type of, through circumstances like we're going through, which is deaths and losses and illness and disease. But here, people are recognizing, appreciating their loved ones in new ways, appreciating what really value systems. We're not distracted by the usual schedules and so on. So to sum up, the Rebbe would look at it as an opportunity, not to explain it away. We didn't want this. We didn't ask for it. It has a lot of pain involved. But at the end of the day, we forge ahead. We are proactive souls with a mission. And this is what God wants of us right now. He wants us to be quarantined. We can't be depressed by it. We can't just complain. We have to figure out, okay, what is this an opportunity? How can we use it to become better people, to spread a better word, to use the situation, the fragile and vulnerable situation we're in, to perhaps open up new channels of communication, becoming more soulful. I just read a statistic that 40% of Americans, I'm sure in England it's not different, are turning towards spirituality and faith. I think it's a lot more than that based on my own experience. Because when your outer life is not working, people turn to their inner life. And that is essentially our responsibility. That's in a nutshell. I hope I captured it. I did justice to it. But the key is to remember it's not just abstract ideas. It's about an attitude. We are always going to win. It's a question of time. And we have to do whatever it takes. And history will look back at this time and say, how did you behave? Were you part of the problem or you're part of the solution? The Rebbe was a solution person. What do we do about it? That was always the question. How do we lift morale? How do we boost people's strength? And that too is part of our immunity system, to feel positive and to feel confident that we will not be conquered, but we will conquer this at the end of the day.
Thank you very much for that. So you mentioned people turning and reconnecting spiritually. Could you, I spoke to someone the other day who told me that a traditional Jew who didn't really pray on a regular basis, and now he said he finds himself spending more time praying, and obviously it's very, very meaningful and very beneficial emotionally and mentally for him. Can you perhaps give some practical tips to a wider audience out there who are not familiar with the prayer in a conventional sense as to how they can, in times like this, what they can do in terms of prayer on a practical level?
Absolutely. Lately there's been a certain trend called mindfulness. Every few years we have another, whether it's meditation or mindfulness. These all go back at the root to something going back to I'm going to call it the 3,800-year formula for Jewish success, that we're still here. And prayer was always a pillar, but prayer is misunderstood by many. They think it's some type of lip service. You read Hebrew words or English words or whatever language. Prayer, the Talmud captures in one line, it says, prayer is the service of the heart. Mm-hmm. Remember, when we're dealing, let's say, with a crisis like this, a lot of it is very emotional. We're afraid, we're concerned, there's an unknown. There's an emotional reaction to this whole situation. That's not just a cerebral, intellectual thing you can push aside. So prayer is actually exercising your heart and aligning it to the right place. And to put it in simple English, it simply comes down to this: to create space, to not allow the news or other things inundating us to control your mood. So a true prayer means you create a little space for yourself. You're going to focus right now on your soul. You can close your eyes and say, what's going on inside here? I'm not going to work right now. I'm not going to entertain myself. We're not going to restaurants. We're not going out. So let's go in. And as we go in, we have to ask ourselves, what's going on inside? That is prayer, essentially. Prayer is communicating with your own divine soul and with God. But let me elaborate a bit more. And I want to speak about it not in a way, as you said, to someone who's never prayed before. They don't even know what kind of tool it is. You hear a lot about people saying gratitude. Gratitude makes you a healthier person because you appreciate that which was done for you. You don't become egocentric. You recognize humbly those that have helped you, have helped shape your life. A part of prayer is gratitude. Gratitude is simply recognizing your blessings in life. That every morning you can wake up and say, you know what, there's a pandemic out there, but God has given me another day. I have my health, I have my body, I have my eyes, my ears, all my senses, my faculties. Showing gratitude is a form of prayer. It's appreciating sometimes things we take for granted. Today we have more time, and this should be a great focus. So prayer has many dimensions, and I don't want to go to the whole, you can imagine prayer is complicated as well. But on a very basic level, think of it this way. Wake up in the morning. There's one very short prayer that we say, and I find it today especially, and I see many people are using it. It's essentially called the Modani Prayer. All it is one line. Thank you for returning my soul to me. It's never been more meaningful. First of all, we're dealing with a real life-threatening virus, so there's much to thank for. But more importantly, thank you for giving me life. Thank you for making me significant, that God, a vote of confidence. And I think everybody understands now that life is not just to be taken for granted. That prayer is very, I would say, refining. It's cleansing. It makes you focus not on what I need, but what I'm needed for. Makes you focus on some higher presence. And honestly, I would say to anyone that's listening, don't see prayer as a burden. Figure out how to tailor it to your form of expression. Because at the end of the day, you're speaking from your heart, through your soul to God. And whatever language works and whatever terms. When you see this prayer book and you start saying, oh, wow, I'm not going to go read now 300 pages or 200 pages or 30 pages or 10 pages, it gets overwhelming and many people don't want to begin. So I would suggest simply look at it in a personal way. There's much to pray for today. I want to pray for health. I want to pray for my loved ones. I want to pray for economic relief under these circumstances. I want to pray to be protected from the unknown and the uncertain. So allow yourself to express, just like you would go to your loving father or loving mother and say, I'm in need right now. There's nothing wrong with being vulnerable. So all the above is a form of prayer where you're pouring your heart out, essentially, sincerely, and feeling I'm in need of things. I'm in need of consolation, of comfort. And at the same time, showing the gratitude, appreciating, and really coming away from prayer almost like renewed, because you're focused on something greater than yourself. It's not just, what am I going to eat? What am I going to drink? How am I going to get my needs met? You could ask yourself the question, why am I here? Why was I blessed to be here this time of history? How can I be of service? So prayer can also be a springboard for essentially making a list of things you're going to do that day that are all in that spirit, the spirit of how you're going to allow your soul to help other people, to comfort, to show some extra kindness and love. So I know this may sound like most people think prayer is just open up. I'll say Shema, I'll say Modani. We're not talking about lip service now. We're not talking about words. We're talking about feelings. And we're entitled to have feelings, and it's important to have that emotional connection to your reality. Whether it's pain or it's joy or it's gratitude or it's celebration, this is what prayer does. It's the exercise of your heart. Avodah shebelev. Making your heart active, feeling, experiencing. And obviously with that all constant trust in the one above, that we will get through this and become stronger in the process.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that. I just want
I'll be
to.
very honest. I'll say to you, Yosef or Rabbi Vogel, whatever. How do I refer to you? How is your community refer to you? Reverend?
Whatever works for you, whatever you're comfortable with.
That honestly, I have not appreciated prayer as much as I do now, because it's another thing. We do it. It's part of our ritual. Now rituals are very different today because nothing is taken for granted. We can't go to synagogue. You have to. So by Chassidim, they'd say, great opportunity. You could sit now and pray 7 hours a day without any disturbances and distractions. I haven't gotten there yet, but that's really what the Hasidic Jews did. They were able to create an oasis in their lives and block out everything going on out there and just enter an inner space and connect to why they're here, connect to God, connect to deeper purpose. It's when you think about it, I appreciate it now more than ever because, when you're busy, I'm busy. I got to go here. I got to go there. You're not going anywhere. This past Shabbos, so what are you going to do during the prayer time? You're not running anywhere. There's no Kiddush club. There's no social interactions. So the truth is, it's a lost art, prayer. I just wanted to bring that up because I would say to all of us, we could all use it. Not just for those that never heard of prayer, but even those that heard of it. It's a whole new opportunity now that they can really look into it. What is this thing called talking to God, talking through your heart, being a little more emotional, spending time and just introspective, looking into yourself, refining some of your, at the end of the day, it's accountability in a real deep way, a real soul searching. Just wanted to add a little to the prayer talk.
No doubt there's a lot more prayer going on in the world from all parts of the world, geographically and also demographically and types of Jews, because as we all know, we're all in this together, and every type of Jew is praying harder, praying more, not less. In the obvious, to use a word which I think is important, is the key trait, as you said, just to sum it up, is sincerity. It's from the heart. So that's key. It's not how eloquently you say it. It's more how
right,
deep
it's right, exactly.
Okay, as we mentioned, and we all sense this, we're all in this together, and every demographic is affected by this too. So there's older people, younger people, affected by this in different ways. And I know for our viewers, Rabbi Jacobsen has been called upon during the past few weeks to address various audiences, including high school kids, teenagers around America, young adults, etc. So I just wanted to ask you to focus a little on this demographic. There are parents, people with children listening to this broadcast tonight. If talking about young adults and teenagers, what questions are they asking? And what do you think, what are you hearing are their most serious challenges? So again, particularly with regard to this demographic.
Absolutely. I've spoken to quite a few high schools and their parents as well, and educators. First of all, you talked about being in it all together. It's interesting. This is an equalizer of ages as well, because we're equally all have no clue. We're clueless. Sometimes younger people don't understand the gravity of a situation. Like, let's say you talk about marriage or love. So you could say, okay, adults relate to it. Younger people don't know what it is yet, a relationship. But I think the shock here and the sheer unpredictability and disruption of everything. I'm talking about everything. Public life, going out to eat, sports, I think is an equalizer. And I think young people are feeling that, I can't turn to my parents for answers. They're not wiser than I am. So one of the questions I hear from quite a few young people is, I feel fear in my parents' eyes. How do I make sure it doesn't impact me? I actually heard that from quite a few. I was surprised, but then I realized that's what's happening. Everyone has realized. It's not like, usually a child, a teenager will come running to a parent to say there's a fire outside. What do we do? Here, nobody has an answer. Adults don't have it. What do we do? we follow guidelines, and we're all quarantined, and we're in it together. So I think that many young people, for the first time, are seeing something where they sense that nobody's in control. And their questions are coming a lot from that. What do you deal with that type of environment? And in many ways, they have less tools, but in many ways they also have better tools because they've not been jaded. So I find also a very a lot of purity and innocence in their questions. They're not as fearful because they haven't, they haven't thought through every worst case scenario as adults like to do. So that's one side of it. Another, people are having issues with, we're all claustrophobically sequestered, and we're getting on each other's nerves. My parents make me nervous. My siblings, it's one thing when you're most of the day out of the house. That's a second interesting reaction. But I also find, I'll talk on a positive side, at least the students and the teenagers I've spoken to, many of them are very idealistic. A lot of asking questions like, where is this going? What is the future of the world going to be like? Is this leading to some messianic, and I'm just showing religious people, is this leading to some new awakening? I'm hearing a lot of that. I was actually surprised. You'd usually think people are going to talk more about how do we protect ourselves and how do we deal with the virus and how do we make sure we don't catch it and what do we do? I think another element that a lot of young people are hearing is that young people can be asymptomatic, but they can be carriers. That's I think a very new, I don't like to call novels now, the novel coronavirus. I don't want to use the word novel, but it's very unique to young people. Have never heard that you can be completely immune in a way to the symptoms, but you really can affect other people. And I think it's causing people to realize, young people, our relationship with each other. So many teenagers take for granted, I have my social circle. And finally, and I think maybe this is the most important thing, this disruption of school, of routines, for younger people has its own particular effect. For adults, it's more security. For children, it's their when I say children, I mean teenagers, they're still in their impressionable years, and they're so dependent on their schedules. I'm going to school, this is midterm, vacation. And though I don't think that anyone yet has it sunk in, because it's only like a month old for most of us, this whole situation. But I could sense that people are very uneasy because everyone's thinking, okay, another week or two, no problem, we're going back to regular. And I think that's the biggest challenge I find, because, and this is where I'm responding now. But what's the response to all of this is to really tell parents and their children that with all the challenges, this is a unique learning opportunity. Whatever you do now is going to train you to deal with any setback and trauma in your life. And we all know no one's immune. This is an opportunity. I just spoke to a whole group of parents and I said, there's no time now for licking our wounds and complaining and saying, okay, what do we do? Yes, we have to follow health guidelines. We're quarantined. But your children are looking to you. They're going to see how you behave. And this is a time where we can train, literally, ourselves and others to become better people. That's why I think it's so vital being of service, encouraging our children. No, call your friends. Call people you haven't spoken to. Volunteer. Obviously, again, with all the health guidelines. Maybe bring some food to an elderly person, leave it at their door. I think more than ever, this will remain with all of us, especially the younger people. And it's rare you have such an opportunity, or at all. Because young people are going to school, they don't have time. But now, that is, and I've said this to all the teenagers I've spoken to, and they all, you could see, I saw it on Zoom, I could see in their faces that it resonated. I said to them, ask yourself one question. What is your role today? Why are you here today? Why did God put you here in 2020? Because you have a mission to demonstrate optimism and hope and faith and strength. Yes, hopefully our parents can help teach us, but you can do it too. Young people today are extremely tech savvy. They're the ones that the Facebook and the Instagrams and the WhatsApp, they do it so natural to them. So in many ways, I could see this being a revolution of the young if they can introduce a certain level of altruism and giving and a spirit of camaraderie. That is, there's no question. And the truth is, it's for all of us. But with the young, it's, I think, uniquely and very more acute because of their, first of all, their impressionable state. And this will be an event that they will never forget, and it will shape everything in their lives. That sums up a bit. Didn't give you all the nuances, but at least somewhat of the picture. And I'll be honest, I think we're just entering into a phase that we have never been prepared for. It's like literally we're going in terrain that nobody can say, oh, okay, let's look back in 1920 or in 1820 or 1970 or whatever it is. There's too many unknowns here. The biggest unknown in my mind is the unknown. The unknown, where is this headed? And especially the exponential component that I don't think we have yet even wrapped our heads around, because everybody knows everything now. We're not isolated. It's a whole world. I know what's going on by you, you know by me. So there's that a collective, almost a collective vulnerability that on one hand can create a lot of fear, but I think it also turn into a tremendous surge of humanitarianism and noble behavior and dignity and majesty. Yeah.
And that is very, that message is certainly very empowering, because instead of the young people feeling, you know, be proactive and do something these extraordinary times. People ask me, people mention it to me, do you think the world will be a better place as a result of these very trying, challenging times? And if so, in what way do you think it will be a better place?
Look, I see from what's going on right now, you don't see, I mean, even though I'm sure there's some individuals exploiting the situation and there's all kinds of scams and stuff like that, but overall, we've seen a lot of beauty coming out of human beings. You know, if it turned into like a type of like looting and just rampant crime and everyone trying to take advantage, it's one thing. That's not happening. So to me, that's a very good sign. It means that there's an underlying, I guess, decency and what we would call a spiritual conscience, a moral conscience that is being elicited by people. There's a certain people helping each other. You know, it's so easy for health people saying, you know what, I don't want to put myself at risk. I'm not helping anybody. I'm not going to a hospital. I'm not going to go expose myself to people who. So that tells me that the trend here is that it will be absolutely a better world. I think we'll learn from this the need to eradicate disease. I think this really caught us all off guard. Nobody imagined it possible, that it would be so global. I think it's going to teach us to be much more, obviously, cautious and careful. But I think this will cause, honestly, I believe humans in the past, whether it was smallpox or influenza or polio, God forbid, we eradicated it. I think this will be, even though other viruses, I'm sure, could emerge, but if you nip it in the bud and there's a global effort, I believe we can usher in an age that we've never been healthier. I know we thought we were invulnerable. We had life expectancy doubled in the last 80 years. Medical breakthroughs, miracles, and so on, keeping people alive that once not possible. Children being born even prematurely, healthy. But this is a wake-up call that, yes, we're still human beings and we're still fragile. So I think it's going to turn into actually a disease killer. I really believe that, because the human race is not going to tolerate another one of these. I mean, God, of course, has his plans, but I think that's going to come out of it in big time. I think it's almost hard to predict. I don't believe there's a sector of society that's going to remain unscathed. Even though, let's call a spade a spade. We know that after wake-up calls happen, people go back and they go back to sleep and become apathetic again. I just think that there's too many, first of all, I think the exponential element, the fact that so many of us are in it, changes things. I think people are going to look at work very differently. Do I need to go to work? Do I need to commute? Maybe I have a new way of working. I think there's going to be appreciation of family and love in an interesting way. I don't think we're just going to go back to, listen, I'm not saying everybody's going to become an angel and a saint, but I would say overall, I can only see a better world. It's, and I really don't have predictions. Obviously, I come from my background and tradition that we believe firmly, and I talk about the Rebbe, that our teachers and sages and mystics and leaders and visionaries, and the Rebbe, of course, told us we're coming to a destination. A lot of people today feel it's the end of days. So I believe that this will lead to a far, far better world, both from a health position, even economy. It could be capitalism will never be the same. The reliance on the markets, the reliance on finance. We were riding high. Let's be honest. 2 months ago, everybody was saying, hey, you know what? The sky's the limit. And it could very well be that people have realized that I know people with private jets, it doesn't help them. They can't go anywhere. So it doesn't help. So I'm not suggesting money is going to be disregarded, but I think the hold of materialism on us has been proven to not be that. We could live without it. And I have to believe that that's going to create a lot of openings that did not exist till now. And I'll be honest, that's what happened to the Jewish people. What happened in Egypt? They went through a tremendous suffering, and they became permanently a better people. We still have our challenges. So I know this might sound idealistic. Someone can say, okay, I'll give you the worst case scenario. What's the worst case scenario? The disease is over and we become more animalistic, more selfish? I don't see that happening. I'm not suggesting, again, a miraculous metamorphosis, but I think enough people, the critical mass, in a serious way have been impacted by this. And even if some may want to just go back to everything in the past, I think there's too many others. And you mentioned the young. I honestly, I cannot predict, but I am of firm belief that this will create, yes, the birth of a new world. In Hasidic thought and Kabbalistic thought, there's a concept called Yesh, Ayin, Yesh. Every paradigm shift needs to go through pain, loss. Now, we all wish and pray that it should be a minimal, but that's how it is. A woman, a mother, goes through birth pangs to give birth to a child. A seed deteriorates in the ground to give birth, to blossom into a sapling. Anywhere in life, you show me excellence, show me something new, preceding it was always some form of shedding a layer of skin to assume a new layer. So it's a paradigm shift in that way. Some of us see it, some of us don't. It's very painful when you're in that void. Who wants to be in a place where you're not here and not there? You shed your skin and you're vulnerable and exposed, but then you don't have a new reality. But there's no question. I mean, just a few years ago, I gave a talk when Trump became president. There's, as you can imagine, the polarization, those that hate him, those that love him. And I did not get up and say I'm pro-Trump. I did not anti. I said, Trump is a sign of the times. It's called disruption. Amazon disrupted the whole retail world. Trump is disrupting Washington and the whole world. He's disrupting. You could see the disruption in a bad way, that he's upsetting the whole EU and the European Union and the whole balance, so to speak, that was there since World War II. Or you could see it as a positive. I'm not getting into that, but disruption for sure it is. And now I couldn't even believe this, the coronavirus. So when the headlines will be written, I really believe this, in 20 years from now, we will say the early part of the 20th century was the age of disruption. Technology disrupted the old order. Politics was disrupted. And now a virus suddenly came in the year 2020. And I compare it sometimes. Think of the last century. 1920 was another world order was changing. The czars, the world order of monarchies, leading to the worst possible century of the most blood spilled. But then look at the second half of the 20th century. Unbelievable prosperity, freedoms. As Jews, we know this personally. So in a strange way, thank God it's not through war and bloodshed, but I think in this early part of this century, we're going through a paradigm shift. And we believe absolutely, and there's many signs to say this, that the world is going to be better. Human beings, I mean, you know, the graphs, Steven Pinker, who writes these books about the statistics of literally the decline of war and violence and crime. We're not saying the world is perfect. So if you look at the trends, you know, the trends are actually a better and finer world, however you explain it. So I have to say that this coronavirus is not bringing the worst out of us. It's bringing the best out of us. Not that all of us are ready for it and not all of us can rise, but essentially, it's a painful thing to say. When people are vulnerable, they can be at their best because they realize they can't hide behind smoke screens and arrogant institutions. And I'm the elite. This whole concept, elite and less elite. What are you talking about? Everybody's exposed to this. So I think that fragility is, on one hand, frightening, but I think it's also very cleansing because it teaches us things about our classes and our structures and our hierarchies. And I find that to be extremely moving because it's our shared humanity. It's our shared destiny. And, you know, suddenly it's like almost like God decided, you're not in control. Figure it out. And I think those of us understand that, surrender to that fact. Someone's to be arrogant now and say, no, I got it all figured out. You know, no, you have nothing figured out. So the only solution is to say, way, I would say, celebrating our vulnerability and celebrating our relationship to some higher narrative. There's nothing wrong to be able to say, you know what, I surrender to the unknown. I accept that there's a higher story here, a narrative that I don't have control over. I find that to be really, honestly, very comforting. Because if it's human error, you can say, okay, you know what, I could have done it differently. There's no human error here. This thing was not done, you know, I mean, whether we did everything perfectly and whether we can contain, you know, but there's a certain element of that's not, it's God wants us to be Passover in our homes, and that's it, period. I find that to be, listen, God wants me to be stranded on an island and there's no one else there. So I could either sit and complain and cry or pick myself up and say, you know, like I remember someone who suffered a great tragedy. He said, 2 options. I either sink or I swim, and I'm not planning to sink. So, I mean, I don't mean to put it so bluntly, but I really think that's where we're at. And I don't even know how we transition here, but spontaneous expressing myself. I think what I'm saying, everyone identifies with. We're in the same place, you know. Really, I think we can't even wrap our heads around it. Because listen, I have a position. I'm a teacher. I'm a writer. But to be very honest, right now, I don't feel that way. I feel like we're in it together. I was trained and blessed to be able to, yes, to console, to comfort, to say some kind words, empowering words. And that's what I have to do. But we're together. I'm as vulnerable as you are. It's like, you know, we're in the front lines. Some people are falling. And we have to strengthen, the rest of us have to strengthen ourselves, you know. Just before I got on, by the way, my first cousin just passed away, a 33-year-old boy. Shlomi Jacobson, unfortunately. So it's not like it's close to home. It's like sad, really. It's tragic. But you know what? We will become stronger for it because we have that infatigable spirit, and that is what is our salvation. To be honest, it's going to come from in here. The only place we're going to get strength from. There's nothing out there. You know, governments can provide relief here, a check here, maybe but the strength from in here is going to be the key to everything. And that's what it is. It's purpose, meaning. Viktor Frankl wrote about it so eloquently and so powerfully. But again, I speak of I don't want to pull rank, but the Jewish people, we've been here how many times? We've been at the abyss, and we've always come out more powerful. And I think we don't have to be ashamed. We should be teaching that to the world. Not only that we can come through, that we will, and let's figure out how to find those deeper resources. I would like to hear that from the leaders. I know you didn't ask me, but I would love that President Trump and the British Prime Minister, who needs a refuah shlema, and every world leader and every celebrity. Where's Hollywood now? Hollywood is meaningless now. You understand? So is sports, because they're only good when the world is the outer world. But why don't they all rise up and say something and say, you know what? We are a great human race. There's a spiritual destiny we have. We're all in it. Let's call for a massive pandemic of goodness and kindness. I wish somebody would say that. And everybody would respond. It would also be politically good for them. I don't know why nobody even thinks of it. To me, it exposes that they're not leaders. They just happen to get into power. They're not. The Rebbe, you asked me the first question. The Rebbe, that's what he'd be getting up. And that's what he'd be saying. Let's create a revolution here. A true revolution. That if the virus can affect 8 billion people and contagious, why don't we create a viral goodness, or goodness that spreads like a ripple effect through the world. I have no question it would be of that nature. So I hope you don't mind. I'm just using this platform. I need to.
No. Rabbi Jacobsen, thank you very much for that. Certainly for sharing that spontaneous optimism, which certainly I remember.
Spontaneous tantrum.
Tantrum, but tantrum has negative connotations. This is tantrum in a positive connotation. I remember, first reading your book, the book Towards a Meaningful Life. And let me just say to all our viewers, Amazon's still working. On the contrary, they're hiring. I'm not saying you should go work for them, but you can certainly buy books, and obviously good books. And I can tell you about this book. This book I have shared with many, many people, and it will give you clarity, perspective from the mystical Hasidic teachings as taught to us by the Rebbe and written beautifully, eloquently by Rabbi Jacobsen. It's called Towards a Meaningful Life. That, I believe, is available on Amazon. And on the back of the book, you have there a line, and it says there, I remember the back of the book and the whole book, words that come from the heart enter the heart. So I thank you very much for sharing that very optimistic message, very positive message. And if I may say that I think that resonates more deeply with anything negative, because people, human beings, we all possess a spark of God. And therefore, we know deep down that in the end it will be good. Obviously, these are very challenging times, and it's difficult to internalize that and to be convinced of that. But I think deep down, when we hear those messages, we take them on. We believe in them. As a matter of fact, Rabbi Jacobsen, my next question was, if you had a chance to convey a message to world leaders, what would you say to them? And obviously, you've spoken very emotionally and sincerely about that. But let me ask you the question. Let's just take it a step further. Like you said, this is what the Rebbe would say. But why do you think that world leaders aren't taking an opportunity to speak at greater length with an optimistic message, an inspirational message? Obviously, we need the guidance and the guidelines from the health and medical experts, and that's extremely important. But in terms of people wanting to hear some inspiration, positive messages, why do you think they are not? And not to remain negative, how would you, what advice would you give them to have the courage to actually talk this sort of language, which could not just help the people, but help the people more effectively?
It's an excellent question, and I'm not speaking of it. I believe the leaders are products of the same society that their followers are, which is, unfortunately, we have the paradox of the 20th or 21st century. On one hand, unprecedented luxuries, whether it's technology, medicine, the ease of pressing a button and getting Amazon Prime an hour later. So we have tremendous blessings, but in direct disproportion, our inner lives have been neglected, let's be honest. Our spiritual lives have almost disappeared for many people because money and material success and power has a tendency to distract you from the inner life. And I think our leaders grew up in that society. I mean, I don't like to put it in such negative terms, but I think they made God irrelevant. They made transcendence irrelevant. Meaning some people want it, go for it. The marginal, the soulful, you always have. But the mainstream, you go to an average university, they don't teach about higher purpose. It becomes, even if they teach it, it's another philosophical course of what human beings aspire to. It's so dry and so hollow of personal. They cut, and I'm not saying this in a dogmatic or religious way. They cut out the transcendent God from our lives. We can manage with science, with a healthy economy, with basically financial incentives, and that's that. What happened to that need that every human being, from child to adult, needs something higher? So I believe the leaders of our time grew up like we did in that world. They didn't have to fight for anything. I always used to ask a question, which I ask now, but it's a very different. I asked young men and women. You're not even young. Let's talk elder men and women. Tell me the top 5 things you're ready to fight for. You're ready to die for. I don't mean physically die. Completely dedicated to. What would be the top 5 things? I am sure in your country, just as in our country, doesn't matter whether, the Revolutionary War of Great Britain and America, we still have certain commonalities. But what was, the answer of an average teenager or adult? I'll tell you what the answer is, because I did it. The 5 top, not necessarily order of priority. Money, sexuality, sports often, my technologies, my video games, and maybe building a healthy family. That may be the 4th one that a lot of people would throw in there. And I'm not exaggerating this. So you don't hear the word, what are your values are you ready to fight for? Do you have a destiny? Do we have a common destiny? That whole concept of life, of a purposeful life. Life purpose is to enjoy myself, to be happy. To be happy, I need money. And that's where it goes. That's where it ends. Not that people are shallow, but there was a certain superficiality. And frankly, the blessing is the curse. What is it coming from? Because we're not fighting world wars. Thank God. The Jewish people, look at this irony. When did assimilation almost decimate the entire Jewish people? When the Jews became emancipated and free. 500 years ago, 99.99% of the Jewish people were committed. It's when we became free, because freedom is the blessing, but it creates apathy. Oh, I don't have to fight for anything. So when's the last time an American fought a war for any values? All wars were fought on European soil. We were protected. World War II. Who remembers World War II? We were all born afterwards. Now suddenly a pandemic suddenly exposes, hey, 1 second, what do I stand for? So I'm not surprised. The leaders grew up, they're one of us. They're not. Now, we both know, and I'm sure others know, you want a leader? You asked me about the Rebbe. The Rebbe is a rarity because he's a spiritual leader, a real spiritual leader. Moses wasn't a political leader. The political leaders of old were spiritual leaders primarily, because the first thing they knew was you have to feed the spirit of human beings, and then you feed their bodies. But there became a dichotomy. I really believe this. You know the healers of the past. You go back a few 4 centuries ago. Who was a healer? A spiritual leader. In the Bible, it says the Kohanim, the priests, were healers. Even in the Christian world, a healer was a religious person. Then, with the split between science and religion, and the war between science and religion, healing became the domain of medical authority, and the spirit was forgotten. So yes, there's a little return in Eastern medicine that you need to also heal the mind. We understand today it's not just body, it's body's mind, soul, etc. But I think the leaders are coming from that world, and I don't blame them because they're clueless. That's why I think anyone that's a true spiritual leader would not need a strategic meeting or handlers to tell them, get up there and say a moral message. It comes naturally. I saw the Rebbe speak week after week after week, as you did. What came out of his mouth? What he lived. How to create a better world. How to bring out the best in people. How we serve. How we transform ourselves and the world around us. That language is not spoken nowhere. So the leaders are just us. They just happen to be elected. That's about it. Now, once in a while, maybe a leader rises. There's a challenge. I would like to believe that someone would rise to the occasion and say, you know what? Maybe it's time to dig deeper, but it hasn't happened yet. So, you know what? Maybe that's why we need programs like this, because I don't look to the leaders. I look into myself and I see, what are you going to do? I just told a guy told me yesterday, he said to me, I have no time for spirituality now. It's too depressing, you know. So I said to him, the world needs you now. You need to rise. Your family needs you. How can I make such a statement? It's like, and he's a person that's very spiritual, but he's like depressed from this whole situation. So he said to me, he's in cognitive dissonance, and he's just not thinking about it. You know, and I think all of us, and I say this to everyone listening now or whenever they'll listen, this is the time you must rise. You cannot retreat and say, oh, it's someone else's problem. There's going to be leaders going to save us. Now, hopefully they'll do enough from a health perspective and economic perspective to keep this from completely, falling apart, exploding. But the soulfulness and the type of human direction, so to speak, the humanitarian direction, the vision is going to be, I believe, up to the grassroots. I don't think it's coming from the top. I don't think they're on top. I think they're just technically on top, But I wish there was. I've been looking. I don't see, not in the East and not in the West. And frankly, the most disappointing, I don't like to say this, Zion and Jerusalem should be the source of this. And that's really what Israel was always. It was the source. It was the clarion call. It was, what does it say in the Medrash? Fascinating, that if the nations of the world knew how much the temple protected them, they would all surround it with legions and make sure it's never destroyed. There's a holiness and there's a message. And again, I don't want to be negative, be honest, but the leaders in Israel, it's a joke. I don't like to be cynical. It's a joke. And I'm not saying what they're saying. It's what they're not saying. Whatever. It's like, there's that. I mean, honestly, I feel blessed that I was around the Rebbe. I know exactly not exactly, I can't say exactly, but I know more or less that we need to create a positive, powerful revolution of spirit here. And obviously with all the sensitivity. But that comes from because I sat by the feet of a true visionary. So I don't, I happened to be in the right time in the right place. I was lucky. It was a mazel. But I also feel the responsibility that I must share this. I'm not going to be silent. That's for sure. Silence is not an option now.
Look, it's certainly the case that if, as you say, coming from the grassroots, certainly the technological mediums available today will allow any encouraging, inspiring message to rise to the top. And in terms of disseminating that message, it's never been easier for one person to disseminate a message to the globe. And please God, the more inspirational, optimistic messages will rise to the surface.
I have to give you credit. You made my blood boil. I feel right now, when we get off of this program, I got to go do something really serious. I mean, I'm like, okay, I'm all worked up now.
You've got many more hours in your day. You're right. Look, as we all know, the Rebbe didn't sleep much. Pandemic, no pandemic, any day of the week, any year over 40 years, the Rebbe didn't sleep because obviously he cared and was so sensitive. We're running out of time, and obviously we appreciate all the the ideas and the insights and the passion that you're sharing. And please God, we can do this more often. But for now, just to finish off, in 2 days' time, Wednesday night, Jewish people around the world will be celebrating commemorating, celebrating the Exodus from Egypt, which is really what molded us and shaped us. It's the birth of our people. And, Pesach, as we know, Passover, the theme is freedom. It's liberation from bondage. And we're supposed to relive and reenact and re-experience that event every single year. So my question is, we know the idea of divine providence. Einstein put it very nicely. He says coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. So the fact that we are celebrating Passover, which is a moment of liberation, which is a moment of freedom, which is a moment of family coming together, isn't it ironic that we celebrate it, and God wants us to celebrate it during a time where the most of the world is under lockdown, which is completely antithetical to freedom and liberation. So how do you square that?
Well, first of all, I'm the first to admit I don't have it all figured out. The timing, why God decided this is happening now. It would make more sense if all this happened in Tisha B'Av, the saddest day of the calendar, where we're sitting alone anyway. Bodad, it says Eicha Yoshva Bodad. But I'll respond the following. Look, I don't know exactly how it all jives, but I will say this. I see it the other way around. That at the end of the day, as much as we don't understand God's mysterious ways, and this lockdown, as you put it, the trauma, the shake-up, the upending of everything, but God definitely gives us the strengths. And I see Pesach coming perfectly in time because we have our own Mitzrayim now. There's an expression that in every generation, every day, we have to envision as we left Egypt, which of course is like a bizarre statement. But most of us have never been to Egypt. So the Hasidic masters say Egypt means Mitzrayim means constraints, limitations, fears, concerns, inhibitions, uncertainties. So we have our own Mitzrayim today. It's not the Mitzrayim of old, it's the Mitzrayim of now. And the Seder is a tremendous opportunity, I would say a methodology, to find true freedom. As a result, there's no question in my mind. So I would answer is that, that the Jews in Egypt, the Bible tells us that they were also quarantined. That night before they left Egypt, it says, stay at home because there's an epidemic in the street. So we can learn from that God at times wants you to stay home and build inner resources. As a matter of fact, I just created, literally just yesterday, a special 15-step program going through the Seder for Passover in the age of Corona. That's what I call it. To show how every step of the 15 steps is actually a journey toward healing, transformation, growth, hope. So I feel that's our challenge now. It's very different than the Manishtana is real today. We say, well, how is this night different? We always said it every year. Now it's very different. It's not just different, it's different than all years, not just this night. And we can either just sit and say, okay, what can we do? Pesach, we're not with family, we're quarantined, blah, blah. Or we could say, no, we're going to be as free as we can. We're going to create a unprecedented, liberating Pesach because it's all in the soul and heart. And with our children, or if you're alone. So I created this thing. I'll plug my own website, meaningfullife.com, where you can find this 15 steps. It's short, 3-minute videos. Also with a musical track, so you have the melodies. And check it out. It's a free program. I'm sure there's other stuff out there, but this I really believe has a lot of potential. And in a way, for the first time, and I'll just say one positive silver lining, for the first time in history, we can actually invite 15, 16 million Jews to our spiritual Seder. Most weren't interested. And now, whether it's through online programming or in some other way, we can connect in ways that we never, like last year, we may have our public Seder, but it didn't reach 16, 15 million Jews, Ken Yerbo, whatever the number is. So I think we have to turn it around. Instead of saying, how does this happen on Passover, to say, how can Pesach help us with this situation to really emancipate ourselves to the extent we can? That we don't have no control over, we don't. So God doesn't want us out in the street. He doesn't want us in synagogues. He doesn't want us in public seders, public events. But that doesn't mean we don't have control over our inner freedom. That can never be taken from us.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Jacobson, for that. I just want to, conclude. You mentioned Viktor Frankl before, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe did have a relationship with Viktor Frankl. Most would not be aware of, but he did, support many of the ideas. And just to illustrate that point you just mentioned, he said that even in Auschwitz, he was a Holocaust survivor. He says, people, even in those conditions, can have every sort of external liberty stripped from them, but in the final analysis, every single human being retains that ability to choose how he's going to respond to that stimulus, to whatever is happening around him. So yes, the context, the framework in which we have to operate and celebrate Pesach this year is more stifling on an external level, as you mentioned, but certainly helps us develop that inner freedom, which will help us, please God, overcome and deal with any setback going forward in the future.
Our bodies may be quarantined, but not our souls.
That's a beautiful way in ending off. Again, we thank Rabbi Jacobsen for those very inspiring, insightful words. A lot to think about, a lot to process. We will, at the bottom under this, we will share the website, and also if Rabbi Jacobsen would be happy to share that document that he prepared for, and everyone, wherever they are, can download it before, print it before, and use that as a personal companion to celebrate, commemorate this very unique Passover experience. And please God, as we conclude in the Seder, L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem, not for next year as a year from Pesach, but even before then, we should celebrate it all together in Jerusalem with the coming of the Mashiach speedily in our days. And again, thank you very much for Rabbi Jacobsen for those inspiring words. And we hope to be in touch in the future. And taking this opportunity on behalf of Meaningful Life Center and Center for Jewish Life to wish each and every one of you, wherever you are in the world, a happy, a healthy, a positive Pesach experience wherever you are. Thank you very much and have a wonderful evening. Thank you, Rabbi Jacobsen.
Thank you.
No,